Hello, my name is Trisha Joy Imperial and we are discussing about scoring rubric. So, what is scoring rubric? Scoring rubric is a tool that explicitly represents the performance expectations for an assignment or piece of work. So, a scoring rubric is a tool that outlines performance expectations for a specific assignment or a test. It provides criteria to evaluate students' work systematically and transparently. Rubrics give students a greater chance of achieving a clear and defined target. A rubric is a scoring guide used to evaluate performance as a product or a project. It has three parts. First, performance criteria. Second, rating scale. Three, indicators. So the performance criteria is the expected level of knowledge and performance established for a population of students. So performance criteria are specific qualities or aspects of a task that will be evaluated. They describe what you are looking for in a student's works. Example, 80% or more of students will earn a level of mastery or higher on the final exam. So, performance criteria is important because it sets clear expectations for students. So, rating scale. The rating scale is a closed-ended survey question used to represent respondent feedback in a comparative form for specific particular features, products, and services. A rating scale is a tool used to assign a score or level to each performance criterion. It shows how well a student met the expectations. Next is indicator. The indicators provide examples of concrete descriptors for each level of performance. Indicators describe specific knowledge, skills, and performance for each standard. Mm, So when to use rubric, extended response items, projects, presentations, and portfolios. So for assignments requiring subject evaluations, such as essays, projects, and representation, by providing detailed feedback uh, to help students improve specific skills during peer review activities to standardize the review process. So the types of rubrics are using rubrics with students, explain what their tests will emphasize, inform students how the assessment will be scored, explain how the results will be used. So one of the type of the rubrics is analytic rubric. So an analytic rubric is one that explicitly breaks down an assignment into its constitutive skills and provides students with guidelines for what each performance level looks like each skill. So break the task in components and score each separately. Provides detailed feedback. As you can see in the picture, detailed SIA young feedback. So an essay rubric with disparate scores for grammar, thesis, and evidence. That's for the example. Next is developmental rubrics. Similar to analytic rubrics but focus on a student's weaknesses and are used to provide feedback rather than assign a grade. So, also developmental rubrics tracks progress over time rather than assigning a final score, useful for longitudinal assessment. Holistic rubrics, using a single performance scale to assess the overall quality of students' work. They are useful when there is no time for specific feedback, such as in standardized testing. So, holistic rubrics also assess the overall quality of work in a single score, ideal for quick grading but less detailed feedback. As you can see in the picture, useful siya para sa ano, example for judge on an overall aesthetic value. Checklist rubrics, also known as single point rubrics. These are a simpler and faster way to grade than traditional rubrics. They identify success criteria and make grading decisions based on all or nothing decisions. So the checklist rubric is a practical tool for evaluating assignments where they focus in on making sure that all required elements are included without a deep dive into grading the quality of each component. It is easy for both teachers and students to use, especially when the task involves clear steps that must be followed. So the assessment method and multiple intelligences. So what is assessment? In education, assessment serves three primary purposes. Assessment for learning helps guide instruction by identifying students' needs. Assessment of learning measures students' achievement after instruction. And last, assessment as learning encourages self-reflection and self-assessment by students. It is the systematic collection of data to monitor the success of a program or course in achieving intended learning outcomes for students. In a classroom, assessments generally have one of three purposes. As I discussed earlier, so assessment for learning. It provides you with a clear snapshot of students' learning and understanding as you teach. It is also allowing you to adjust everything from your classroom management strategies to your lesson plans as you go. So the diagnostic assessment is a form of pre-assessment where teachers can evaluate students' strengths, weaknesses, knowledge, and skills before their instruction. So, diagnosis assessment helps teachers identify students' existing knowledge, which in turn enables them to provide targeted support and make informed decisions about how to approach new topics. This ensures that students are given the opportunity to succeed by addressing their unique learning needs right from the start. So, when to use diagnostic assessment? Example sa differential instruction. When naa kay diverse class, diagnosis assessment can help identify varying levels of ability and tailor your teaching methods accordingly. Next is formative assessment, a process used by teachers and students during instruction that provides feedback to adjust ongoing teaching and learning to improve students' achievement of intended instructional outcomes. So it also helps teachers adjust their instruction in real time, ensures that students are constantly improving and creates an active, engaging learning environment. By using formative assessment, educators can provide students with the tools and support they need to succeed. Assessment of learning. It is a way to find out what students have learned and if they are aligning to curriculum or grade level standards. Summative assessment is an assessment administered at the end of an instructional unit in a course. These assessments are intended to evaluate intended students' learning by comparing performance to a standard or benchmark. For example, of summative assessment is final exam.
Assessment as learning. actively involves students in the learning process. It teaches critical thinking skills, problem solving, and encourages students to set achievable goals for themselves and objectively measures their progress. So, ang example ani kay as students use a rubric to evaluate their own essay and identifies where which area or where areas they need to improve their writing skills. Next, we have the Epstative assessment. So, it's the practice of determining students' progress based on their earlier work. So, kani nga assessment kay track a students' progress over time by comparing their performance to their own past work. So, example, student compare their scores on pre-test and post-test to use how much their understanding of a topic has grown. Norm reference assessment. It yields an estimate of the position of tested individual in the predefined population with respect to the trait being measured, assigning on Assigning scores on such tests may be described as relative grading, marking on a curve, or grading on a curve. So, example ani niya kay student takes the SAT and their score compared to the other students nationwide. Next, we have the criterion reference assessment is the process of evaluating and grading the learning of students against a set of predefined qualities criteria without reference to the achievement of others. So, for example, the teacher used a rubric to evaluate the science project based on the criteria, like for example, the design, research, and how they present their science project. Next, multiple intelligence by Howard Gardner. So, what is multiple intelligence? So, multiple intelligence developed by Howard Gardner says that intelligent isn't just one thing. We have different strengths, like being good with words, solving problem, or understanding music. This means we can learn in different ways, and educators can tailor teaching to each student's unique. First, we have the verbal linguistic intelligence. Well-developed verbal skills and sensitivity to the sounds, meanings, and rhythms of words. So, kani kay strong with words, good at writing, speaking, and learning languages. So, ang example ani nila kay mga authors, poets, og lawyers. Next, we have the mathematical logical intelligence. So, the ability to think conceptually and abstractly and the capacity to discern logical or numerical patterns. So, ang kuan ani niya kay katong mga good reasoning, problem solving, and abstract thinking. Ang example nila ani kay ang scientists, mathematician, and engineers. Musical intelligence. The ability to produce and appreciate rhythm, pitch, and timbre. So, ang kaning mga learners are those who are good perceiving and creating and understanding music. So, example ani nila kay sila tong mga musician, mga composer, og ang singer. Next, we have the visual spatial intelligence. So, the capacity to think in images and pictures to visualize accurately and abstract. So, ang kani nga mga kuan kay good at perceiving and manipulation object in space, like for example, the artist, architect, and pilot. Next, we have the bodily kinesthetic intelligence. So, the ability to control one's body movement and to handle objects skillfully. So, these learners are those who are skilled with their body, good at sports, dance, and craft. Example, the athletes, dancers, and surgeons. Next, we have the interpersonal intelligence, the capacity to detect and respond appropriately to the moods, motivation, and desires of others. So, kani nga mga learners or mga tao kay katong mga good at understanding and interacting with others. Like for example, the therapists, teachers, and the politician. Next, the intrapersonal intelligence, the capacity to be self-aware and in tune with inner feelings, values, belief, and thinking processes. So, kani sila kay good in understanding themselves, their feelings, and motivation. So, example ani nila kay katong mga philosophers, mga writers, o psychologists. Next, we have the naturalist intelligence. So, the ability to recognize and categorize plants, animals, and other objects in nature. So, maayo pud ni sila sa recognizing pattern in natures. Kani sila kay pwede ang mga bisag sa mga biologists, mga botanists or environmentalists basta katong mga who love natures. And maoro to ang mga multiple intelligence. So next, the assessment of learning outcomes, the K-12 program. So here are assessment practices lifted from DepEd Order 8 Series 2015 for the guidance of all teachers. So first, teachers should employ assessment methods that are consistent with standards. This means that assessment as a process must be based on the standards and competencies that are stated in K-12 curriculum guide. So, assessment must be based not on content but on standards and competencies. Therefore, there must be alignment between assessment tools or tasks and standards and competencies. Second, teacher must employ both formative and summative assessment both individually and collaboratively. Assessment is done primarily to ensure learning. Thus, teachers are expected to assess learning in every stages of lesson development, like for beginning, middle, and at the end. Third, grades are function of written work, performance tests, and quarterly tests. This means that grades come from multiple sources with emphasis on performance tests, grade 1 to 12. So, grade does not come from only one source, rather from multiple sources. Lastly, the cognitive process dimension given by Cratwell and Anderson 2001 from remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, and evaluating, and creating governs formulation of assessment tasks. So, having an understanding of different teaching approaches from which we all can learn, as well as a toolbox with a variety of ways to contents to students is valuable for increasing the accessibility of learning experiences for all students. And that's all. Thank you.